In the summer of 2005, in the coastal town of Gansby, South Africa, Tom and his wife Lisa decided to spend a sunny afternoon on the ocean. Known for its scenic beauty and abundant marine life, Gansby was a favorite spot for locals and tourists alike. Tom and Lisa had been married for 5 years, and they often enjoyed these peaceful boat rides, using them to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The sky was clear that day, and the sea was calm. The couple set off from the shore in their small boat with a packed lunch and a cooler full of drinks. They laughed and chatted as the boat gently rocked on the waves. Tom, feeling exceptionally playful, was in high spirits. He loved making Lisa laugh and often teased her in good fun. As they cruised along the coast, Tom got a naughty idea. He thought it would be funny to scare Lisa by pushing her into the water. With a playful grin, he snuck up behind her and gave her a gentle push. Lisa, taken by surprise, screamed as she fell overboard. For a moment, Tom chuckled, expecting Lisa to pop up and laugh it off. However, when Lisa resurfaced, her face showed shock and annoyance. She trod the water and shouted at Tom, but he could tell she wasn't mad. He extended a hand to help her back on the boat, still grinning. Then everything changed in an instant. The serene blue of the water suddenly turned dark as a massive shadow moved beneath the surface. Tom's smile vanished as he saw a huge dorsal fin slicing through the water toward Lisa. His heart pounded in his chest and panic set in. Lisa's eyes widened with terror as she saw the fin too. She frantically tried to swim towards the boat, but the great white shark was too fast. In a horrifying moment, the shark lunged at Lisa, dragging her underwater. The sea turned red with blood as Tom watched in helpless horror. Tom screamed, reaching out into the water. He grabbed a nearby rope and threw it toward Lisa, but it was too late. The shark was relentless, and Tom's desperate attempts to save her were futile. Tom felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and terror. He had only meant to play a harmless prank, but now his beloved wife was in danger because of him. He could barely breathe as he saw the shark thrashing in the water, Lisa's screams piercing the air. In his frantic state, Tom tried everything he could to fend off the shark. He grabbed an oar and began hitting the water, shouting and trying to scare the predator away. But the shark was relentless, its mighty jaws clamping down on Lisa with deadly force. Tom's eyes filled with tears as he realized the gravity of his mistake. The playful mood was gone, replaced by a nightmare he couldn't escape. He could hear Lisa's cries for help, and it tore him apart that he couldn't do more to save her. The scene was a blur of red water, thrashing fins and desperate screams. Finally, the shark disappeared into the depths, leaving behind a trail of blood. Shaking and sobbing, Tom pulled the rope back into the boat, but Lisa was gone. The water around him was eerily calm again, but Tom knew his life would never be the same. The sunny afternoon had turned into a scene of horror and loss. Tom's prank had gone wrong, leaving him with a haunting guilt that would never fade. The boat rocked gently on the waves, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Tom's heart. Desperately, Tom grabbed the radio and called for help, his voice cracking with anguish as he repeated his plea. He identified his boat, Seabreeze, and explained that a shark had attacked his wife, urgently requesting assistance. The Coast Guard responded quickly, assuring Tom they were coming. He clung to the hope that somehow they could save Lisa. But deep down, he knew the truth. The blood in the water and the severity of the attack left little room for hope. Minutes felt like hours as Tom waited, staring at where Lisa had disappeared. He replayed the events repeatedly in his mind, wishing he could turn back time. The sound of approaching boats broke his trance. The Coast Guard arrived, and a team of divers quickly prepared to search the area. Tom watched helplessly as the divers dove into the water. Every second felt like an eternity. He prayed silently, begging for a miracle. The divers searched diligently, but after what seemed like forever, they surfaced with grim expressions. One of them approached Tom, shaking his head, conveying the heartbreaking news without words. Tom's heart shattered. The reality of Lisa's death hit him like a tidal wave. He fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The Coast Guard crew tried to console him, but their words were lost in the sea of his grief. Tom couldn't stop thinking about how his innocent prank had led to such a tragic end. The boat ride back to shore was a blur. Tom sat silently, staring at the horizon, lost in his thoughts. The once beautiful coast of Gansby now seemed like a place of horror and loss. When they reached the dock, Tom was met by local authorities who gently escorted him to a nearby station to take his statement. In the following days, Tom couldn't escape the nightmare that haunted him. He stayed at a small hotel, unable to return to the home he had shared with Lisa. The town of Gansby, once a place of joy and love, had constantly reminded him of his fatal mistake. News of the incident spread quickly, and Tom found himself under intense scrutiny. Some people offered sympathy, but others blamed him for what had happened. The guilt weighed heavily on his shoulders, and he struggled to find a way to cope with his loss. Tom decided to seek therapy, hoping to find some semblance of peace. His therapist, Dr. Melanie Brooks, listened patiently as he recounted the tragic events. She encouraged him to express his feelings and to find ways to honor Lisa's memory. With time, Tom began to channel his grief into something positive. He started a foundation in Lisa's name dedicated to shark conservation and safety awareness. He wanted to prevent others from experiencing the same tragedy. The foundation aimed to educate people about the dangers of the ocean and how to respect its inhabitants. Tom also began participating in community outreach programs, sharing his story in the hopes that it would serve as a cautionary tale. He wanted people to understand the importance of taking safety seriously and being aware of their surroundings. Though the pain of losing Lisa never indeed went away, Tom found solace in helping others. He dedicated his life to making a difference, turning his grief into a force for good. The foundation grew and Tom found a new purpose, keeping Lisa's memory alive through his work. Years later, standing on the shore of Gansby, Tom looked out at the ocean with a heavy heart. The water was calm and beautiful, but he knew its power too well. He whispered a silent prayer for Lisa, hoping she had found peace. That sunny afternoon changed Tom's life forever, but he had learned to live with his loss. He knew Lisa would always be a part of him, guiding him as he worked to make the world safer. In 2012, 5 friends embarked on an adventurous camping trip to the secluded coast of El Nido, Palawan, Philippines. The pristine beaches, fringed by towering limestone cliffs and lush tropical foliage, promised a serene escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. Leading the charge was Liam Mercado, an outdoor enthusiast who thirsted for exploration. His friends, Samantha Villanueva, Jericho Reyes, Miguel Santos, and Isabel Alvarez, shared his passion for adventure and were eager to trade the concrete jungle for a few days of untamed beauty. As their pickup truck rumbled along the winding coastal road, the group couldn't help but marvel at the breathtaking scenery that unfolded before them. The azure waters of the West Philippine Sea sparkled invitingly, while the white sandy beaches seemed to beckon them towards a tranquil paradise. After a 2-hour drive, they finally reached their destination, a remote cove tucked away from the well-trodden tourist spots. Liam had stumbled upon this hidden gem during a previous hiking expedition, and couldn't wait to share its beauty with his friends. They quickly set up their tents, assembling a cozy base camp amidst the swaying palm trees. The waves gently lapping against the shore provided a soothing backdrop to their laughter and banter as they unpacked their supplies. The first day was spent lounging on the beach, soaking up the warm tropical sun, and swimming in the crystal-clear waters. Jericho, a self-proclaimed adrenaline junkie, even managed to convince the group to try their hand at cliff jumping from the nearby limestone formations. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Samantha noticed something peculiar. She signaled the rest to confirm if they had seen something, her brow furrowed in concern. The others turned to follow her gaze, scanning the water's surface. That's when they spotted a dark triangular fin slicing through the waves, unmistakably belonging to a shark. Liam waved it off, his voice reassuring. Liam was not worried as the thought of it probably being just a reef shark came in. He exclaimed that they were harmless and quite common in those waters. The group accepted his explanation, but Samantha couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of her stomach. As night fell, they gathered around the crackling campfire, roasting marshmallows and swapping stories, the earlier sighting of the shark temporarily forgotten. A natural storyteller, Miguel regaled them with tales of his previous camping adventures, his animated gestures casting flickering shadows across their faces. It wasn't until the following morning that the true gravity of their situation became apparent. Isabel had woken early, drawn to the tranquil waters by the promise of a refreshing morning swim. As she waded into the shallows, her eyes widened in shock at the sight before her. Dozens of sharks, their sleek bodies gliding effortlessly through the turquoise waters, patrolled the shoreline. Panic gripped her and she hurried back to the safety of the beach, her heart pounding in her chest. She cried, signaling them to wake up, her voice tinged with fear. There were sharks everywhere. The others sprang into action, their eyes widening as they took in the unsettling scene. The once peaceful cove had transformed into a veritable feeding ground, teeming with the unmistakable silhouettes of hungry sharks. Liam's face paled as he recognized the distinctive shape of the predators, blacktip reef sharks, known for their aggressive nature and territorial behavior. He muttered that it wasn't good, his mind racing to formulate a plan. They needed to return to the truck and leave there immediately. The group quickly packed up their belongings, their movements hurried and tense. Ever the daredevil, Jericho couldn't resist one last dip in the water, much to the others' dismay. As he waded out into the shallows, the sharks seemed to take notice, their sleek bodies drawing closer to the thrashing figure. Samantha watched in horror as one particularly bold specimen surged towards Jericho, its mighty jaws snapping shut mere inches from his leg. She screamed to Jericho, her voice shrill with terror. Thankfully, Jericho heeded her warning, scrambling back towards the safety of the beach, his face pale and his body trembling from the close call. With their supplies hastily packed and their nerves frayed, the group set off towards the narrow path that led back to their vehicle. Their footsteps hurried, and their eyes scanning the water's edge for any sign of the prowling sharks. The path wound along the coastline, hugging the rocky cliffs and offering little protection from the encroaching tide. As they rounded a particularly treacherous bend, Miguel's foot caught on a loose rock, sending him tumbling towards the water's edge. A black-tip shark materialized from the depths in a heartbeat, its mighty jaws clamping down on Miguel's outstretched leg. The sickening crunch of bone echoed across the cove as the shark thrashed violently, dragging the screaming Miguel deeper into the water. The others watched in horror, frozen in place by the gruesome scene unfolding before them. Liam finally sprang into action, grabbing a nearby branch and charging towards the shark, his face contorted with rage and determination. The shark, momentarily startled by the commotion, released its grip on Miguel's mangled leg, allowing Liam and Jericho to drag their injured friend back to safety. Isabel and Samantha quickly fashioned a makeshift tourniquet, their hands trembling as they worked to stem the blood flow. Miguel's face was ashen, his eyes glazed with pain and shock. They had to get out of with their voices barely above a whisper. The group pressed on, their pace slowed by Miguel's injury but fueled by a renewed sense of urgency. The path seemed to stretch endlessly before them, each twist and turn revealing more treacherous terrain, and the ever-present threat of the sharks lurking in the shallows. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they caught sight of their pickup truck, miraculously untouched amidst the chaos. With renewed determination, they hurried towards the vehicle, their shoes slapping against the sand as they ran. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked the doors and ushered the others inside. Miguel's ragged breathing filled the cabin as Samantha and Isabel tended to his wounds, their faces etched with worry. As the truck roared to life, Liam gunned the engine, the tires kicking up a plume of sand as they hurtled down the narrow path toward the main road. Sensing the commotion, the sharks surged towards the retreating vehicle, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with terrifying speed. Jericho watched in horror as one particularly tenacious black-tip shark leaped from the water, its mighty jaws snapping shut mere inches from the rear window. Liam's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, his foot flooring the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, careening around sharp bends and leaving the sharks in their wake. It wasn't until they reached the main coastal road that the group breathed a sigh of relief. Miguel's condition, however, remained critical, and they knew they needed to get him to a hospital as soon as possible. In the weeks and months that followed, the scars of their encounter would heal, but the memories would linger forever. Miguel, his leg permanently disfigured by the shark's vicious attack, found solace in the unwavering support of his friends. Later, the group remained inseparable, their bond forged in the crucible of their shared experience. They became advocates for responsible ecotourism, sharing their cautionary tales with others and promoting a greater understanding of the delicate balance between humans and the natural world. As the sun lay below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and red, the group looked back on their harrowing ordeal with a newfound respect for nature's power and unpredictability. What had begun as a peaceful camping trip had quickly descended into a nightmarish struggle for survival against the very creatures they had come to admire. In 2002, Dr. Claire Bennett, a dedicated biologist, found herself deep in the heart of the Honey Island swamp in Louisiana. The swamp was a lush, mysterious place, teeming with wildlife and dense with vegetation. Claire was there to track the movements of alligators, studying their behavior and habitats. The project was part of a broader effort to understand and preserve the delicate ecosystem of the bayou. The day was humid, the air thick with the scent of moss and water. Claire navigated her small boat through the narrow waterways, her eyes sharp and alert. She had spent years in the field and was familiar with the dangers of the swamp. However, her passion for wildlife and conservation always outweighed her fears. As she moved through the marshland, Claire spotted several alligators basking on the banks. She noted their positions and behavior in her field journal, using her binoculars to get a closer look. The swamp was alive with sounds, the croaks of frogs, the birds' calls, and the leaves rustling. Suddenly, Claire noticed something unusual. Among the alligators, a massive crocodile lay partially submerged in the water. Crocodiles were not native to this part of Louisiana, and this one seemed particularly large and menacing. Claire's curiosity was piqued, but so was her sense of caution. She steered her boat closer to get a better look, careful not to disturb the creature. As she approached, the crocodile's eyes snapped open, locking onto her. Claire's heart skipped a beat. The reptile's gaze was intense, and she could sense its agitation. She quickly realized this was no ordinary crocodile. It was unusually aggressive and likely displaced from its natural habitat. Before Claire could react, the crocodile jumped at the boat with terrifying speed. The force of the attack capsized the small vessel, sending Claire tumbling into the murky water. The cold swamp water enveloped her, and she struggled to surface. Her mind raced with thoughts of survival as she fought to stay calm. Breaking through the surface, Claire gasped for air. The crocodile was still nearby, its presence a constant threat. She had to act quickly. Using her knowledge of the swamp, she identified the closest cypress tree, its roots creating a natural barrier in the water. Claire swam towards it, hoping to use the tree as a temporary refuge. Reaching the tree, she pulled herself onto the roots, her hands slipping on the wet, moss-covered bark. The crocodile circled below, its eyes never leaving her. Claire's heart pounded as she tried to think of her next move. She needed to find a way to signal for help or reach a safer location, but the dense marshland made it challenging to see a clear path. Claire knew she couldn't stay on the tree roots forever. The crocodile was relentless, and she had to find a way to escape. She scanned the surrounding swamp, looking for anything that might help her. Her boat was overturned, and her equipment scattered, but she spotted her backpack floating nearby. It contained a flare gun and other survival tools. Summoning her courage, Claire planned her next move. She would have to distract the crocodile long enough to retrieve her backpack and use the flare gun to signal for help. The swamp was vast, and she needed to figure out how far she was from the nearest ranger station, but she had to try. Taking a deep breath, Claire prepared to dive back into the water. The crocodile was still close, its powerful body cutting through the murky depths. She knew this was a dangerous gamble, but it was her best chance at survival. Gathering her strength, she pushed off the tree roots. She swam towards her floating backpack, praying she could outmaneuver the predator and reach safety. The murky water made it difficult to see, but Claire's determination kept her focused. Every second felt like an eternity as she kicked her legs, propelling herself forward. The crocodile, sensing her movement, surged towards her. Claire's heart pounded, but she kept her eyes on the backpack. Just as she reached it, the crocodile lunged, its mighty jaws snapping shut mere inches from her leg. Claire grabbed the bag and twisted away, using all her strength to pull herself onto another cluster of roots nearby. Breathing heavily, Claire quickly unzipped the backpack and pulled out the flare gun. She loaded it with shaking hands, knowing this might be her only chance to signal for help. The crocodile circled below, its eyes fixed on her every move. Claire aimed the flare gun skyward and fired. The bright red flare shot into the sky, illuminating the swamp with a sudden burst of light. The sound and light momentarily confused the crocodile. Seizing the opportunity, Claire scanned the area to find a way to reach higher ground. She spotted a narrow path of solid land leading to a higher bank. It was risky, but it was her best option. She secured the backpack on her shoulders, took a deep breath, and plunged back into the water. Swimming with all her might, Claire made her way toward the path. The crocodile, recovering from its momentary distraction, followed closely behind. Claire's muscles burned with exertion, but she pushed herself harder, desperate to reach safety. As she neared the path, she felt a sharp pain in her leg. The crocodile had nipped her, its teeth grazing her calf. Claire screamed but didn't stop. She used the adrenaline surging her body to propel herself onto the solid ground. She scrambled up the bank, slipping on the wet, muddy surface. The crocodile lunged one last time, its jaws snapping shut, just as Claire pulled herself out of its reach. Exhausted and in pain, she collapsed on the bank, her body trembling. She knew she couldn't rest yet. The flare would only bring help if someone saw it. Claire forced herself to stand and began limping along the path, calling out for help. Her voice echoed through the swamp, a desperate plea in the vast, silent wilderness. Minutes felt like hours as she continued, each step a painful reminder of her close encounter with the crocodile. Just as Claire's strength began to wane, she heard a distant shout. She looked up to see a group of rangers approaching her, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Relief washed over her, and she stumbled forward, meeting them halfway. The rangers quickly assessed her injuries and helped her onto a stretcher. As they carried her back to their boat, Claire recounted the harrowing experience. They listened with wide eyes, amazed at her bravery and resourcefulness. The ride back to the ranger station was filled with reassurances and promises of medical attention. At the station, Claire was treated for her injuries. Though exhausted and shaken, she was grateful to be alive. The encounter with the crocodile had been terrifying, but it also highlighted the unpredictable nature of the swamp. Claire knew she would need time to recover, both physically and mentally. Still, she also felt renewed respect for the environment in which she studied. As she lay in the medical bay, Claire thought about the research she had come to conduct. The swamp was a place of beauty and danger, and her experience had only deepened her commitment to understanding and protecting it. In 2009, a private charter plane flying over the remote Cook Islands in the South Pacific encountered severe turbulence and storms as it traversed the vast open waters between French Polynesia and Samoa. On board were Zethrid Melik, a wealthy businessman, his wife Giotica, and their teenage son Chakor, Marvik Siraj, Zethrid's assistant, Inaya Devi, a family friend, and Elian Cruz, the pilot. Despite Elian's efforts, the plane lost altitude rapidly and crashed into the open ocean. After inflating a life raft and rowing to shore, the 6 survivors were stranded on a remote, uninhabited island. With limited supplies salvaged from the wreckage, they quickly realized the dire nature of their situation. Food and fresh water were scarce, and they had no means of signaling for rescue. Zethrid determined their best hope was to fish from the island's shoreline, using makeshift equipment crafted from the plane's debris. However, their efforts soon attracted an unwanted visitor, a massive bull shark stalking the shallows. On their 4th fishing attempt, Giotica felt a powerful tug on her line as the considerable shark struck, nearly pulling her into the bloody turmoil before the line snapped. The group scattered back from the water's edge, shaken by the close call but undeterred in their need for sustenance. They cautiously resumed fishing over the next few days while one person stood sentry to fend off further attacks. The bull shark grew increasingly aggressive, recognizing their activities as a food source. When it struck again, this time going after Chakor, Elian and Marvik had to intervene to prevent the teen from being pulled into the shark's gaping maw. Realizing that their fishing expeditions were too hazardous to continue, the castaways had to find another means of survival. As they were coping with dehydration beneath the scorching sun, Inaya proposed an ingenious solution, using plastic bottles and salt water to create rudimentary solar stills, to extract fresh drinking water through evaporation and condensation. Her plan was a success, providing enough hydration to reinvigorate the group. However, maintaining and expanding the stills would require them to perilously venture close to the shoreline, within reach of the ravenous shark patrolling the shallows. Keeping a vigilant lookout with makeshift spears at the ready, they began digging additional still pits all along the beach, exposing themselves directly to the predator's territory. Their struggle to survive had transformed into a battle of wits and resourcefulness against a relentless primordial adversary. As the days passed without rescue, the castaways were pitted in an escalating life-or-death contest with the ancient Leviathan lurking just offshore. With their solar stills providing only temporary respite, they would have to take even more risks and push their luck further to outlast the island's resident hunter. On the 18th day, Elian and Marvik were hard at work digging a new still pit when the massive bull shark suddenly emerged from the shallows, its gaping jaws wide to ambush them. Acting quickly, Zethrid grabbed one of the sharpened spears and plunged it into the shark's mouth as it lunged. The strike wasn't deep enough to be fatal, but it was enough to drive the primordial beast back and make it reconsider its easy meal. From then on, the castaways' makeshift defensive tactics kept the vengeful shark at bay while maintaining their still operations. 2 days later, a marine research vessel passing through the area picked up the group's faint emergency signals and found them just in time to airlift them to safety. Though deeply shaken, the island survivors had outwitted and outlasted one of nature's most formidable predators through their perseverance and ingenuity. In the aftermath, the Melek family used their wealth and influence to champion shark conservation efforts and fund further research into sustainable marine ecosystems. Their harrowing ordeal reminded us that despite our capabilities, humanity will always be humbled by nature's incredible, inscrutable forces when we encroach on their territory. In 2001, Tom and his wife Lisa set out for a relaxing afternoon on their boat near the Farallon Islands off California, USA. The weather was perfect, with the sun shining brightly and a gentle breeze blowing across the water. Tom and Lisa loved these peaceful outings, where they could escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Tom, in a playful mood, decided to spice up their day with a harmless prank. As they cruised along the coast, he grinned mischievously and leaned over to Lisa, who was gazing at the horizon. Without a second thought, he gently pushed her, sending her splashing into the cool blue water. Tom expected her to surface laughing, perhaps a little annoyed but amused by his antics. However, as Lisa hit the water, she let out a startled scream. Tom's smile faded as he realized she hadn't expected the push. He watched the water, waiting for her to reappear and scold him for the prank. But seconds ticked by, and Lisa didn't surface. Instead, the water around where she had fallen began to turn a murky shade of red. Panic seized Tom's heart as he leaned over the side of the boat, desperately searching for Lisa. His voice was frantic, filled with mounting dread. Suddenly he saw a massive dorsal fin slicing through the water. A great white shark was attacking Lisa, drawn by the disturbance and scent of blood. Tom's world turned upside down. He grabbed a rope and life ring, desperate to save his wife. He threw the ring towards her, but the shark was relentless, thrashing violently in the water. Tom could barely see Lisa amidst the chaos, her screams piercing his ears and tearing at his heart. Tom's voice was choked with fear and guilt as he desperately tried to help Lisa. He yanked the boat's emergency horn, hoping the loud noise might scare the shark away. The blaring sound echoed across the water, but the shark seemed undeterred. It circled Lisa, its mighty jaws snapping hungrily. Tom's mind raced, searching for anything he could use to fend off the predator. He grabbed a boat hook, leaned over the side, and jabbed it toward the shark. The shark responded with a violent lunge, nearly capsizing the boat. Tom's grip on the hook tightened, his knuckles white with fear. The water around Lisa churned with a horrifying mix of blood and foam. Tom's eyes filled with tears as he realized the gravity of his mistake. This was supposed to be a fun outing, a light-hearted day on the water. Now it had turned into a nightmare. Lisa's struggles grew weaker and her cries for help faded. Tom's heart shattered as he watched helplessly, unable to stop the relentless shark attack. Desperately, he thrust the boat hook toward the shark, hoping against hope to drive it away. But his efforts seemed futile. As the minutes passed, the shark finally retreated, leaving a gruesome scene behind. Tom pulled Lisa's lifeless body from the water, his hands trembling. A crushing weight of guilt and sorrow replaced the joy and laughter of the morning. Tom cradled Lisa's lifeless body in his arms, tears streaming down his face. A crushing weight of guilt and sorrow replaced the joy and laughter of the morning. He gently laid her down on the deck, his heart shattered by the reality of what had happened. The clear waters around the Farallon Islands, once a symbol of their peaceful escapes, now felt like a cruel reminder of his fatal mistake. Tom's mind raced as he thought about what to do next. He knew he had to get back to shore, but every part of him wanted to stay frozen in time, unable to face the world without Lisa. With trembling hands, he started the boat's engine and turned it towards the mainland. The journey felt endless, the boat cutting through the waves that now seemed indifferent to his pain. As Tom approached the marina, he radioed ahead for help. His voice was barely recognizable, choked with grief. He conveyed the devastating news. There had been an accident and Lisa was gone. The response was immediate, the urgency in the operator's voice comforting his numb mind. They assured him that emergency services would be waiting when he docked. The boat docked at the marina, and paramedics rushed to Tom's aid. They gently took Lisa's body, confirming what Tom already knew, but couldn't fully accept. She was gone. The police arrived shortly after, and Tom was taken to a small room at the marina for questioning. He recounted the events with a heavy heart, each word a painful reminder of his actions. News of the tragedy spread quickly through the small coastal town. Friends and family were shocked and heartbroken. Tom's guilt was overwhelming, and he struggled to find any solace. He spent days and a days, replaying the moment repeatedly in his mind, wishing he could take it all back. The funeral was a sad affair. Lisa's family and friends gathered to say their final goodbyes. Tom stood by her casket, his eyes red and swollen from days of crying. He felt the weight of their sorrow and the burden of his guilt. He wanted to speak, apologize, and make amends, but words failed him. In the following weeks, Tom isolated himself, haunted by the memories of that fateful day. He couldn't escape the image of Lisa's terrified face, the blood in the water, and the shark's relentless attack. He knew he needed to find a way to cope, but nothing seemed to help. Finally, a close friend suggested he seek counseling. Reluctantly, Tom agreed. The sessions were painful but necessary. He spoke about his guilt, sorrow, and desperate wish to act differently. Through therapy, he began to understand that while his actions had tragic consequences, he needed to find a way to forgive himself. Tom also contacted Lisa's family, expressing his deep remorse. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and pain, but it was a step toward healing. Lisa's family, though devastated, recognized that Tom's prank had been a terrible mistake, not a malicious act. As time passed, Tom began to channel his grief into raising awareness about the dangers of pranks and the importance of safety around wildlife. He started a foundation in Lisa's name dedicated to promoting marine safety and education. Speaking at schools and community centers, Tom shared his story, hoping to prevent others from making the same tragic mistake. Though the pain of losing Lisa would never entirely go away, Tom found a sense of purpose in his mission. He knew that he could never undo what had happened. Still, he could honor Lisa's memory by positively impacting the world. Each day was a step towards healing, a journey of remembrance and redemption. It was a crisp autumn morning in 2011 when Zosha Kamuri, one of the most experienced cave rescue divers in the Florida Keys, received an emergency call that would test the limits of her bravery and skills. A lone spear fisherman, Handon Khalil, had failed to resurface from the treacherous underwater cave system in the marine sanctuary waters off the coast of Key Largo in the upper Florida Keys. Zosha and her team quickly gathered their specialized gear and sped to the remote cave. The cave entrance opened beneath the surface, requiring a complex, staged decompression descent through the narrow lava tube. Visibility was poor, as the cave's waters were thick with planktonic blooms, and silt kicked up from previous diving activity. As Zosha made her way deeper into the lightless labyrinth, she picked up Handon's faint distress signals on her locator equipment. The fisherman had become entangled in his line amid a dense thicket of ancient stalactites and stalagmites in one of the cave's innermost chambers. She could hear his panicked breathing over the communications link as his air supply dwindled critically low. Zosha increased her pace, pulling herself hand over hand along the guideline, her high-powered lamps cutting through the inky void. That's when she saw a massive creature drifting through the shadows ahead. It was quickly 15 feet long and decidedly not the docile reef sharks occasionally spotted within the area. The unmistakable silhouette, elongated snout, and distinct dorsal fin told her it was an adult great white shark. White sharks were scarce in these waters, and Zosha's blood went cold when she realized this alpha predator may have taken up residence inside the cave system, with a trapped human providing the perfect lure. She signaled Handon to cease all movement and went breathlessly still, watching the great white's every twitch. The shark seemed to sense her presence, languidly approaching with methodical precision, its obsidian eyes piercing her. Zosha reached for her shark billy stick, a defensive weapon to drive off an attack if needed. A cloud of silt billowed up as something shifted behind the great white, briefly obscuring its position. Zosha's heart leaped into her throat when it cleared. 2 more sharks had joined the first, swimming in tandem. She was surrounded by a pack of aggressive hunters closing in on her and their prey. Her safety training urged her to abandon the rescue attempt in the face of such extreme peril. But with Handon's fading life signs still registering, her determination kicked in. Shoving her fear aside, Zosha pushed forward towards the entangled fisherman. She had inches to spare as the trio of great whites began circling tighter, swimming figure eights around them. Their pointed snouts and rows of serrated teeth emerged from the gloom, almost close enough to graze her suit. Finally reaching Handon's position, Zosha rapidly untangled the fishing line from the stalagmites and secured him to her safety leash. His tank was nearly depleted from struggling in a futile panic. As the menacing shapes of the great whites drew closer, Zosha decided to activate the emergency heat marker. The searing flash momentarily disoriented the sharks, causing them to flinch and retreat, buying her a precious head start. Not wasting her narrow window of opportunity, Zosha kicked into high gear, using her powerful fins to propel herself and Handon back down the guideline towards the exit as swiftly as possible. The great whites gave furious pursuit, jaws gaping hungrily mere feet behind. She armed her shark billy and prepared for a confrontation. But as they approached the final bottleneck entrance to the caves, the sharks inexplicably broke off their attack, vanishing back into the blackness from which they came. Zosha didn't wait to discover their motivation, continuing and bursting through the surface into the open ocean. Gasping for air, she looked down at Handon, who was already beginning to regain consciousness. Though shaken to her core, Zosha had conquered one of the most extreme tests of her diving career through her bravery, skill, and unwavering commitment to the rescue ethos, trading one life for another no matter what monsters may lurk in the darkness. In 1997, Emma Fisher, an experienced scuba diver and marine photographer, found herself at the Belize Barrier Reef. The sun was high, casting a golden glow over the crystal-clear waters. Emma had traveled far and wide, capturing the beauty of underwater life. But the Belize Barrier Reef was extraordinary. It was one of the world's most extensive and vibrant coral reefs. With her camera equipment ready, Emma suited up and plunged into the warm Caribbean waters. As she descended, the world above disappeared, replaced by a mesmerizing underwater paradise. Colorful corals of every shape and size decorated the seabed, and schools of fish darted around her, creating a living rainbow. Emma's mission was to capture the essence of the reef. Still, she also hoped for a rare encounter with a magnificent marine creature. She swam deeper, her eyes scanning every nook and cranny. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. There, gliding gracefully through the water, was a magnificent swordfish. Its long, sharp bill and sleek body shimmered in the sunlight that filtered through the water. Excited by sight, Emma carefully adjusted her camera and followed the swordfish. She moved slowly, making sure not to startle it. The swordfish swam calmly at first, seemingly unaware of Emma's presence. She captured shot after shot, each one more breathtaking than the last. The swordfish's powerful movements and the way it sliced through the water were mesmerizing. As Emma drew closer, the swordfish seemed to notice her. It paused for a moment, its large eyes locking onto her. Emma's heart pounded, but she remained focused on her task. She needed just a few more close-up shots to complete her collection. However, the swordfish suddenly changed its demeanor. It felt threatened by Emma's persistent presence, so it charged at her with incredible speed without warning. Emma barely had time to react as the swordfish's sharp bill pierced her diving equipment, causing a sharp pain in her side. Bubbles erupted from her punctured gear, and panic set in. Emma's mind raced. She had to fend off the swordfish and return to the surface before her air supply ran out. The swordfish wasn't giving up. It charged at her again, and Emma barely dodged its sharp bill. Her breathing became rapid and shallow as fear gripped her. She knew she had to act fast. Emma tried to push the swordfish away using her camera as a shield. The swordfish, relentless in its aggression, continued to attack. Emma's vision blurred with each movement, and her strength was waning. She kicked hard, trying to distance herself from the relentless predator. In her struggle, Emma's thoughts drifted to her family and friends. She couldn't let this be the end. She had to survive. Gathering her remaining strength, Emma reached for her emergency flare. She pulled the trigger and a bright, blinding light erupted from the flare. The swordfish, startled by the sudden burst of light, retreated momentarily. This was Emma's chance. She kicked her legs with all her might, propelling herself upward. The surface seemed so far away, but she couldn't give up. Every second counted, and her air supply was dwindling fast. Emma's injured side throbbed with pain, but she pushed through it, focusing on the light above. As she ascended, she glanced back to see the swordfish still lurking below, but it no longer pursued her. Emma's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She had to make it to the surface. She had to survive. As Emma neared the surface, her lungs burned for fresh air. She broke through the water, gasping and coughing, the salty air filling her lungs. She floated on her back momentarily, allowing herself to catch her breath. The sun's warmth on her face was a comforting reminder that she had made it. But she wasn't safe yet. Her diving equipment was damaged and her side was bleeding. She needed to get back to her boat. Emma spotted her small boat anchored not far away. Summoning her remaining strength, she swam toward it, each movement sending a sharp pain through her side. Reaching the boat, Emma grabbed onto the side and hauled herself up with great effort. She collapsed onto the deck, breathing heavily. The reality of what had just happened sank in, and she felt relief and gratitude. She was alive. Emma knew she needed to tend to her wound. She rummaged through her emergency kit, finding some bandages and antiseptic. The cut wasn't deep, but it was painful. She cleaned and bandaged it as best as she could. The adrenaline wore off, and she felt exhausted but couldn't rest. She needed to get back to shore and get proper medical attention. Emma started the boat's engine and navigated back towards the marina. The ride was slow and bumpy, but she focused on returning safely. The beautiful scenery of the reef that had once filled her with wonder now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the harrowing experience. Back at the marina, Emma was greeted by concerned faces. Her colleagues and the marina staff rushed to help her as she docked the boat. They listened in shock as she recounted her encounter with the aggressive swordfish. They helped her out of the ship and guided her to a nearby clinic. The doctor examined her wound, reassuring her that she would be okay with some rest and proper care. Emma felt a wave of relief. She had survived a terrifying ordeal and would live to tell the tale. Emma's story spread throughout the diving community in the days that followed. Many were amazed at her bravery and resilience. She reviewed the photos she had taken before the attack. They were some of the most stunning shots she had ever captured, a testament to the beauty and danger of the underwater world. Emma decided to use her experience as a lesson for others. She shared her story at diving seminars and workshops, emphasizing the importance of respecting marine life and being prepared for unexpected dangers. Her near-death experience had given her a new perspective on life and a renewed appreciation for the delicate balance of nature. Although the encounter had been terrifying, Emma didn't let it deter her from her passion. Once fully recovered, she returned to the water, more cautious but equally determined to continue her work. The ocean was her home. She knew she could coexist with its magnificent creatures with respect and care. The swordfish, still roaming the depths of the Belize Barrier Reef, remained a reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the sea. Emma's story was a powerful reminder to all divers always to be vigilant and respectful of the marine world. The waters off Norway shimmered under the pale light of the northern sun. Aboard a research vessel was a team of marine biologists. The team had been on the water for days, and they prepared for another observation of orca behavior on that fateful day in June 1986. Among them, was Dr. Sarah Collins, a renowned expert in marine mammals whose years of experience and passion for the ocean had brought her to these waters. Sarah had spent her life studying orcas' complex social structures and behaviors. She was captivated by their intelligence and the intricate ways they communicated and interacted. This expedition was significant. The team hoped to gather data to shed light on the subtle dynamics of orca pods in the North Atlantic. Norway's pristine, icy fjords offered a unique opportunity to observe these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. The day began with a briefing on the vessel's deck. Sarah and her colleagues, including Dr. Mark Stevenson and Dr. Elena Petrova, discussed the day's objectives and the specific pod they intended to follow. A previous group of orcas had shown unusual behaviors in the Norwegian water during the last time out, so Sarah's team was eager to learn more about them. After completing preparations, they launched the smaller dive boat and set off toward where the previous group had been last seen. As they approached the area, the team began to set up their equipment. Sarah prepared for the dive, donning her dry suit and checking her scuba gear meticulously. The water temperature was just above freezing, making the dive physically demanding. Despite the cold, Sarah was eager to get into the water. Observing the orcas up close was always a thrilling experience that justified the discomfort and risks. Once everything was ready, Sarah and Mark entered the water, leaving Elena and the rest of the team on the boat to monitor their progress and ensure their safety. The icy water enveloped them as they descended, the world above fading into a muffled quiet. Sarah marveled at the sight of the orcas, their sleek black and white bodies cut through the water with effortless grace. She focused on the leader, a large male. He was majestic, his dorsal fin rising tall and proud. The pod's members moved in harmony, their behaviors a testament to the complex social bonds that Sarah had dedicated her life to understanding. They began documenting the orcas' activities, capturing footage, and making detailed notes on their behavior. The orcas seemed calm, their movements unhurried as they swam through their territory. After some time, Sarah signaled to Mark that she would explore a bit further. Mark acknowledged, understanding that Sarah's instincts often led to valuable insights. She swam a short distance away, still within visual range of the boat, but with a clearer view of the deeper waters where the orcas often hunted. As she floated there, observing and taking notes, Sarah felt a deep connection to these creatures and their environment. The moment's tranquility was suddenly shattered when she noticed a change in the orca's behavior. The leader, who had been calm, began to move more erratically. The other pod members followed suit, their previously harmonious movements disjointed and agitated. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized something was wrong. She scanned the water, trying to understand what had caused the shift. Her eyes widened in alarm as she saw the orca turning towards her, his massive body accelerating with surprising speed. The orca's behavior was uncharacteristically aggressive, his focus locked on her. Instinctively, Sarah began to retreat, signaling to Mark and the team on the boat that she was in trouble. The cold water seemed to close around her as she tried to maintain her composure and think clearly. The orca approach was terrifyingly swift, and Sarah knew she had to act quickly to avoid a direct encounter. From the boat, Elena and the rest of the team watched in horror as the situation unfolded. They could see the orca's powerful body slicing through the water towards Sarah. Elena shouted instructions, her voice barely reaching the divers over the distance and the noise of the equipment. The team scrambled to start the boat, trying to get closer to Sarah to offer her a chance to escape. Sarah's training kicked in, and she began to ascend slowly, trying to avoid any sudden movements that might further provoke the orca. But just as she was nearing the surface, the orca struck. The impact was brutal, the force of the orca's body slamming into Sarah and sending her reeling. Pain shot through her as she struggled to regain her bearings. The water around her churned violently, a chaotic blur of movement and bubbles. She knew she had to reach the surface to get to the boat's safety, but the orca's attack had left her disoriented and vulnerable. The team on the boat could only watch in helpless terror as the scene unfolded. They were close now, but not close enough. Mark, who had surfaced ahead of Sarah, was frantically trying to get to her, his safety momentarily forgotten in his desperate need to help his colleague. The orca circled back, his aggression undiminished. Sarah's world became a nightmarish sequence of pain and struggle as the orca struck again, its mighty jaws closing around her leg. She fought to free herself, her mind a haze of pain and fear. The water was tinged with blood, a stark reminder of the peril she was in. Finally, the boat reached her. Elena and the others managed to pull Sarah from the water. Mark climbed aboard, his face a mask of horror and helplessness. They laid Sarah on the deck, her body battered and bleeding. The Orca, its aggressive display now over, disappeared into the depths, leaving behind a scene of devastation. The team quickly stabilized Sarah, their hands trembling with the shock and gravity of what had just occurred. They radioed for help, their voices tense as they relayed the details of the attack. The boat sped towards the nearest port, every second feeling like an eternity as they fought to keep Sarah alive. In the aftermath, the team grappled with a profound sense of guilt and responsibility. They had come to study and understand these magnificent creatures, but their presence had inadvertently provoked a deadly encounter. Sarah's injuries were severe, and she was rushed to the hospital as soon as they reached land. The medical team worked tirelessly to treat her wounds and stabilize her condition. Her leg, badly damaged by the orca's bite, required extensive surgery. Her colleagues, though physically unscathed, were deeply affected by the trauma of the incident. Sarah's recovery was slow and painful. The emotional and psychological toll of the attack matched the physical scars. She had always felt a deep connection to the ocean and its inhabitants, but the encounter had shaken her. Her passion for marine biology remained, but a new awareness of its risks and responsibilities now tempered it. The rugged coastline of British Columbia, with its breathtaking cliffs, dense forests, and crystal-clear waters, was a paradise for adventure enthusiasts. Claire had long dreamed of kayaking through these waters, where nature's raw beauty was fully displayed. An experienced kayaker, she navigated challenging rivers and open seas. But this trip promised a unique blend of thrill and serenity she had never encountered before. The adventurers gathered early one morning, their kayaks lined up along the rocky shore. Excitement buzzed in the air as they prepared for their journey. The expedition's leader, a seasoned guide familiar with these waters, provided a final briefing. Claire listened intently, eager to embark on this new adventure. They paddled for hours, navigating through wide channels and narrow passages, the landscape shifting around them like a dream scene. Claire relished the physical exertion, the push and pull of the paddle against the water, the salty breeze on her face. She stayed near the front of the group, and her enthusiasm and skill were evident in every stroke. As the day wore on, they approached a particularly narrow channel, its sides rising steeply with dense foliage. The guide motioned for the group to tighten up and proceed with caution. The channel was known for its tricky currents and the occasional presence of marine wildlife. Halfway through the channel, a sudden shift in the current caught Claire off guard. She struggled to maintain her course, her kayak veering off slightly. Concentrating on regaining control, she didn't notice the gap widening between her and the rest of the group. By the time she steadied herself, they were already disappearing around a bend, their voices growing faint. Her confidence in her abilities tempered Claire's initial concern. She had faced worse situations before and knew she could catch up with the group. She quickened her pace, her paddle strokes solid and steady. The channel widened slightly and she saw a glimpse of the open water ahead. Just as she felt a sense of relief, she noticed a shadow beneath the surface, moving with deliberate grace. An orca emerged from the depths, its black and white body glistening in the sunlight. Claire had seen orcas from a distance on previous trips, but this one was closer than she had ever been. Its presence was majestic and slightly unnerving. The orca circled her kayak, its movements smooth and purposeful. Claire felt a mix of awe and unease. She knew orcas were generally curious but usually not aggressive towards humans. However, the orca's behavior was unusual. It continued to circle her kayak, coming closer with each pass. Claire's unease grew as the orca's massive body brushed against the hull of her kayak, causing it to wobble. She tried to paddle away slowly, hoping to put some distance between them without provoking it. The orca followed, its actions more deliberate and forceful. Without warning, the orca struck the kayak from the side, tipping it violently. Claire was thrown into the water, the shock of the cold searing through her body. Instinctively, she kicked to the surface, gasping for air. The kayak floated nearby, partially submerged. Claire grabbed hold of it, trying to calm her racing heart. The orca reappeared, its dorsal fin cutting through the water ominously. It circled her again, closer this time. Claire's splashing and the rapid beating of her heart seemed to draw it in. She knew she needed to stay calm, but fear gripped her tightly. The orca lunged, its powerful body creating a wave that pushed her under. She fought to surface, her limbs heavy with panic and cold. Each time she resurfaced, the orca was there, its presence a terrifying shadow. Claire's mind raced, searching for a way to fend off the massive creature. She kicked and splashed, hoping to startle it. But the orca seemed more curious than deterred. It lunged again, this time grazing her leg with its body. The force of the impact sent her spinning, disoriented and gasping. Desperation took hold as Claire struggled to stay afloat. She clung to the kayak, using it as a shield. The orca circled, its intent unreadable but its power undeniable. Claire's strength waned, the cold seeping into her bones. She knew she couldn't last much longer in the freezing water, her movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. In brief clarity, Claire remembered advice from a survival course. Make yourself as uninteresting as possible. She forced herself to stop splashing and float as still as she could despite the panic surging. The orca, sensing the change, slowed its approach. It circled her one last time, then turned and swam away, disappearing into the depths from which it had come. Claire floated, her body numb and exhausted. She scanned the water, half expecting the orca to return. Minutes passed, and the water remained still. The realization of her predicament quickly overshadowed the initial surge of relief. Alone and cold, she needed to return to her kayak and signal for help. With great effort, Claire managed to right the kayak. Her limbs felt like lead, but sheer determination drove her. She hoisted herself back onto the kayak, her movements clumsy and weak. She secured herself and took a moment to catch her breath, the ordeal leaving her trembling and shaking. Claire reached for the emergency whistle attached to her life vest and began to blow, the sharp sound piercing the stillness. She prayed that the group wasn't too far away and would hear her distress signal. The minutes she stretched on, each one an eternity. The cold gnawed at her and she fought to stay awake, to keep blowing the whistle despite her growing exhaustion. Finally, she heard the faint sound of paddles and voices in the distance. Relief washed over her as the group appeared around the bend, the guide leading the way. They spotted her and paddled swiftly, their concern evident in their expressions. Claire's strength gave out as they reached her and she finally collapsed into their arms, safe. Back on solid ground, Claire's ordeal was far from over. The hypothermia needed immediate attention, and she was rushed to the nearest medical facility. As she lay wrapped in blankets, her body slowly warming, she reflected on the encounter. With its immense power and presence, the orca had tested her in ways she had never imagined. She had faced her deepest fears and survived, but the experience had left an indelible mark on her. The group rallied around her, offering support and sharing their relief at her survival. The adventure that had begun with such excitement had turned into a harrowing ordeal, a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability. Mark had spent decades navigating the icy waters of Alaska, the sea as much a part of him as his heartbeat. He knew its rhythms, its moods, the secrets it whispered in the wind and waves. His boat had weathered countless storms and rough seas, a testament to his skill and resilience. On a cold, clear morning, Mark set out from the small fishing village he called home, accompanied by his loyal crew. The air was crisp, the sky a pale blue streaked with wisps of cloud. The promise of a good haul buoyed their spirits as they ventured further from shore. As the boat glided over the frigid depths, the crew prepared their nets and lines, each man moving with practiced efficiency. The sea was calm, a deceptive veneer of tranquility over its hidden dangers. The men spoke little, their focus on the task at hand. Mark felt a familiar sense of anticipation, a blend of hope and respect for the sea's capricious bounty. Hours passed as they worked, the boat rocking gently with the swell. The catch was good, but the nets were heavy with fish. Mark's sharp, vigilant eyes scanned the horizon and the waters around them. Then he noticed the dark shapes moving beneath the surface, sleek and powerful. A pod of orcas, their black and white bodies gliding through the water with a grace that belied their size. Mark knew orcas well and had seen them many times over the years. They were intelligent, social creatures, often curious but generally not aggressive. Yet there was something different about this pod, a restlessness that set him on edge. He watched as they circled the boat, their movements deliberate, their eyes fixed on the catch. One of the orcas, a massive bull, broke away from the others, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife. Mark felt a shiver of unease. The orca seemed to be assessing the boat, its behavior more aggressive than he had ever seen. He signaled to his crew to be cautious, aware that the presence of the orcas could complicate their efforts. As they pulled in the last of the nets, the bull orca made its move. With a sudden burst of speed, it rammed the side of the boat, the impact reverberating through the hull. The crew staggered by the force. The orca rammed again, its frustration palpable. With a sinking feeling, Mark realized that the orca was angry, perhaps driven by hunger and the sight of their catch. Mark's grip on the railing tightened as he barked orders, trying to maintain control amidst the chaos. The boat rocked wildly, and in a moment of terrifying clarity, he felt himself losing his balance. The world tilted and Mark was thrown overboard, the icy water closing over him with a shock that stole his breath. He kicked to the surface, gasping for air, his body numb from the cold. The crew shouted, their voices distant and distorted by the water. He looked around, disoriented, his heart pounding in his chest. Before he could react, he felt a powerful force beneath him. The bull orca, seizing the opportunity, had come for him. It struck with a force that drove the air from his lungs, dragging him under the surface. Mark's world became a blur of cold and dark, the orca's grip unyielding. He struggled, instinctively trying to break free, but the orca was relentless. Above the water, the crew moved frantically. They threw lines and buoys, desperate to reach Mark. The boat, now battered and listing, became a frantic scene of rescue efforts. Mark's closest friend and first mate, Joe, took charge, his face grimly determined. They knew time was against them, the freezing water sapping Mark's strength with every passing second. Mark's lungs burned for air as he fought to the surface, his vision blurring. The cold bit into him, numbing his limbs and slowing his movements. Desperation fueled his efforts, but the orca seemed to sense his every move. Mark managed to break the surface in a brief, harrowing moment, drawing a ragged breath before being pulled under again. He caught a glimpse of the boat, his crew reaching out, their faces etched with fear. The orca's grip shifted, and Mark felt a searing pain in his leg as the creature's teeth dug in. He fought the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision, his will to survive burning fiercely. Joe, seeing the orca's pattern, took a desperate gamble. He grabbed a long pole for handling nets and leaned over the side, aiming for the orca. He struck the water near the orca's head with desperate precision, hoping to startle it into releasing Mark. The orca flinched, its grip loosening just enough. Sensing the chance, Mark summoned his strength and kicked free, propelling himself towards the boat. The crew pulled him aboard, their hands steady despite the chaos. They hauled him over the side, collapsing to the deck with him as the boat rocked violently. The orca, seemingly satisfied or perhaps wary of further resistance, retreated, joining its pod as they swam away. The crew quickly attended to Mark, their relief mingling with concern. He was shivering uncontrollably, his leg bleeding from the orca's bite. Joe wrapped him in blankets, trying to stave off the hypothermia that threatened to claim him. The boat, though damaged, was still seaworthy, and they turned it toward shore, pushing the engine to its limits. Hours later, they reached the village, where medical help awaited. Mark was rushed to the small clinic, his crew following, their faces lined with worry and exhaustion. The doctor, familiar with the perils of the sea, worked quickly to stabilize Mark. The bite wounds were cleaned and stitched, and he was treated for hypothermia. The villagers, a tight-knit community bound by their shared life by the sea, gathered to offer support and prayers. Mark's survival was a testament to his resilience and the unwavering efforts of his crew. The rolling hills and serene landscapes of New Zealand had always been on the Addams family's bucket list. The allure of its natural beauty and the promise of adventure had drawn them from their home in Colorado to this island nation at the world's edge. Mark and Susan Addams, along with their children, 15-year-old Jake and 12-year-old Emma, were eager to experience everything the country had to offer. On the morning of the tour, the family arrived at the marina, their excitement palpable. They boarded the tour boat and a handful of other tourists, all eager for the experience. As the ship sailed out into the open ocean, the anticipation grew. The coastline receded into the distance, replaced by the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The guides kept a vigilant watch, scanning the horizon for any sign of the orcas. After about an hour, one of the guides pointed out a distant waterspout. The excitement on the boat was electric as everyone realized they were about to see the orcas. The boat slowed as it approached the pod. The orcas were magnificent, sleek black and white bodies moving gracefully through the water. The tourists watched in awe as the orcas surfaced and dived, their dorsal fins slicing through the water with effortless power. The guides provided information about the orcas, their behaviors, and the importance of respecting their natural habitat. After observing several other orcas from the boat, the guides announced that snorkeling near them would be an opportunity. They gave detailed instructions on safely interacting with the orcas, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a respectful distance and not making sudden movements that could startle the animals. The orcas were generally curious and friendly, but were still wild animals, and their behavior could be unpredictable. Jake was particularly excited about the snorkeling. He had always been fascinated by marine life, and the chance to swim near orcas was a dream come true. He donned his wetsuit and snorkeling gear, his heart pounding with excitement and a touch of nervousness. The family was among the first to enter the water, followed by a few other tourists. The water was cold, but the thrill of the experience kept their spirits high. As they floated in the water, the orcas came closer, their immense size even more impressive up close. Jake was mesmerized by the sight of a calf swimming alongside its mother. The calf was playful, darting around its mother and occasionally breaching the surface with youthful exuberance. Jake, caught up in the moment, began to swim closer to get a better look. Unbeknownst to Jake, his movements were starting to draw the attention of the mother orca. Orcas are known for their strong family bonds, and mothers are particularly protective of their calves. Sensing that Jake was too close to her young one, the mother orca exhibited signs of agitation, but Jake overlooked that. He was still trying to look closer when the mother orca charged. The sheer power and speed of the orca were terrifying. In an instant, the mother orca had closed the distance between them. She rammed into Jake, sending him tumbling through the water. The force of the impact knocked the snorkel from his mouth and the mask from his face. The tourists and guides on the boat watched in horror. The previously serene scene had transformed into chaos. The guides acted quickly, shouting instructions and moving the ship closer to try to rescue Jake. Seeing his son in danger, Mark swam towards him with all his might, his fatherly instincts overriding his fear. The mother orca, still protective of her calf, continued to display aggressive behavior. She circled Jake, her massive body cutting through the water with terrifying precision. Jake, disoriented and struggling to stay afloat, was in grave danger. The guides knew they had to act fast to save him. One of the guides, a seasoned diver named Tom, grabbed a flotation device and dove into the water. He swam towards Jake with powerful strokes, his training and experience guiding him through the difficult situation. Reaching Jake, he quickly secured the flotation device around him, providing much-needed support. With Jake now more buoyant, Tom began to tow him back towards the boat while keeping a wary eye on the mother orca. Mark reached Jake and Tom just as they neared the boat. Together, they managed to get Jake onto the ship, his body shivering from cold and shock. Susan and Emma, their faces pale with fear, helped pull him on board. The guides quickly wrapped Jake in blankets to warm and calm him down. The family huddled around him, their relief palpable but tempered by the lingering fear. The boat turned and headed back to the marina at full speed. The guides closely watched Jake, monitoring his condition and providing first aid as best they could. Back at the marina, an ambulance was waiting. The paramedics took over, quickly assessing Jake's injuries and stabilizing him for transport to the nearest hospital. The family, shaken and exhausted, followed closely, their dream vacation becoming a nightmare. At the hospital, Jake was treated for his injuries. The medical team worked efficiently to address his immediate needs, relieving pain and ensuring his condition was stable. Mark, Susan, and Emma waited anxiously, their minds racing with the day's events. The initial relief of having Jake out of immediate danger was overshadowed by realizing how close they had come to losing him. In the following days, the family remained in New Zealand while Jake recovered. The hospital staff was supportive, providing not only medical care but also counseling to help the family process the trauma they had experienced. John had always been drawn to the sea. The vastness, the challenge, and the ocean's raw power called to him in a way that nothing else could. Known for his extreme long-distance ocean swims, he had made a name for himself by pushing the limits of human endurance. Each swim was a testament to his skill, determination, and unyielding spirit. With its wild, unpredictable nature, the Pacific Ocean was his next frontier. After months of meticulous planning and intense training, John was ready to embark on his most ambitious swim yet. The goal was to cross a treacherous stretch of the Pacific Ocean, a feat that would break records and solidify his place in the annals of extreme swimming. He had a support boat accompanying him, manned by a team of experienced sailors and medical professionals. They had mapped out the route, prepared for every contingency, and were ready to ensure his safety. The morning of the swim dawned clear and calm, the horizon a sharp line against the blue sky. John stood at the water's edge, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with a profound sense of calm. This was where he belonged, on the brink of the unknown, ready to dive into the depths of his capabilities. With a final deep breath, he plunged into the cold embrace of the ocean, his body cutting through the water with practiced ease. The swim was everything he had hoped for the first few hours. The rhythm of his strokes, the steady beat of his heart, and the cool water flowing past him created a meditative state. The support boat kept pace alongside him, a reassuring presence. They communicated through hand signals and brief visual checks, ensuring he was on course and in good condition. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, John entered a deeper stretch of water where the bottom fell away into the abyss and the currents grew stronger. It was here, in the heart of the ocean, that he felt most alive. The isolation was profound. The only sounds were the rhythmic splash of his strokes and the distant hum of the support boat's engine. He was a speck in the vast expanse, entirely at the mercy of the elements. It was around this time that John first noticed the orca, a lone, majestic creature, its black and white body gliding effortlessly through the water. He was initially fascinated. He had encountered dolphins and even sharks on previous swims, but this orca was a different kind of presence. It moved with a grace and power that commanded respect. John felt a thrill of awe as he watched it from the corner of his eye, marveling at the sheer beauty of the animal. The orca seemed curious, its dark eyes studying him as it swam parallel to his path. John maintained his course, his strokes steady and measured. The support boat signaled to him, acknowledging the orca's presence but not expressing any immediate concern. Orcas were known to be intelligent and often curious about human activities, and he took comfort in the support boat's proximity. As the minutes turned into hours, the orca's behavior changed. It moved closer, its circles tightening around him. John tried to keep his focus, pushing down the rising sense of unease. The support boat's crew noticed the change too, and their movements on deck were growing more urgent. The orca's curiosity turned into something more aggressive, its movements more erratic. Suddenly, the orca struck quickly, taking John entirely by surprise. The impact was brutal, the force of the massive creature slamming into his side and knocking the breath from his lungs. Before he could react, he was dragged under. The orca's powerful jaws clamped around his torso. The world became a blur of cold, dark water and searing pain. Panic surged through him as he fought to break free, his arms and legs thrashing in a desperate attempt to escape. The orca's grip was unyielding, its power overwhelming. John could feel his strength waning, the oxygen burning in his lungs as he struggled to reach the surface. The support boat loomed above, the frantic shouts of the crew muffled by the water. In a last desperate effort, the crew deployed a line with a flotation device, hoping to give John something to grab onto. They maneuvered the boat closer, trying to position themselves between John and the orca. Perhaps startled by the sudden intrusion, the orca released its grip, giving John a brief moment of freedom. He kicked hard, propelling himself towards the surface, his vision narrowing as he fought against the darkness closing in. John broke the surface, gasping for air, his body screaming in pain. The crew reached him, their hands pulling him onto the deck with relief. The medical team sprang into action, assessing his injuries and stabilizing him as best they could. The orca lingered nearby, its dark silhouette a reminder of the ocean's unpredictability. The journey back to shore was a blur of pain and exhaustion. John drifted in and out of consciousness, the events replaying in his mind like a fragmented nightmare. The support team worked tirelessly, their faces grim with determination. They knew getting him to proper medical care was a race against time. Hours later, they reached the nearest port, where an ambulance awaited. John was rushed to the hospital, his condition critical. The medical team fought to save him, treating the deep wounds and managing the shock. His body had endured a brutal assault, and the road to recovery would be long and arduous. The attack's news spread quickly, capturing people's attention worldwide. John became a symbol of the ocean's unpredictable dangers, a stark reminder of the risks inherent in pushing the limits of human endurance. His story was told and retold, a cautionary tale of the power and unpredictability of nature. On a warm summer day, the sun shone brightly over the azure waters off the coast of California. The beach was a haven of laughter and joy, filled with families, couples, and groups of friends making the most of the idyllic weather. Among them was a group of friends who had come to escape the monotony of their daily lives. Emily, a vibrant young woman with an infectious smile, led the group. Her friends, drawn to her adventurous spirit, eagerly followed her lead as she proposed a swim in the inviting ocean. The group got to the beach, changed their clothes, and plunged into the calm waters, their laughter echoing the gentle waves. They swam and splashed, their carefree joy palpable to anyone who watched. With her dark hair streaming behind her like a banner, Emily seemed to embody the summer day's essence. She reveled in the freedom the ocean provided, feeling the rhythmic pulse of the sea against her skin. As the day wore on, the friends decided to wade further out, where the water was deeper and more relaxed. They formed a loose circle, bobbing in the waves and chatting idly. Emily felt a sudden need for privacy to relieve herself. But instead of getting out of the water, she decided to use the cover of the vast ocean to relieve herself. So she excused herself from the group and waded a bit farther out. Unbeknownst to Emily and her friends, a pod of orcas had been hunting nearby. With their striking black and white markings, these magnificent creatures moved with an eerie grace through the water. Their target was a school of fish scattered in a frenzy, the orcas weaving through them with lethal precision. Unaware of the silent drama beneath the waves, Emily found a secluded spot. She floated there for a moment, enjoying the solitude and the vastness of the ocean around her. She had always felt a deep connection to the sea, drawn to its mystery and beauty. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle rocking of the waves soothe her while she relieved herself. Suddenly, the calm was shattered. One of the orcas, a large male, had detected a new scent in the water. Unlike the fish they had been hunting, it was a scent that piqued its curiosity and triggered its predatory instincts. Oblivious to the danger, Emily began to make her way back towards her friends. The water around her seemed to shift, a subtle change that she overlooked in her relaxed state. Now entirely focused on its new target, the orca surged forward with terrifying speed. Its sleek body cut through the water like a torpedo, its eyes locked on Emily. The attack was swift and brutal. One moment Emily was there, a bright figure against the ocean's blue expanse. The next, she was gone, pulled under the surface with a force that left no time for resistance or cry. The orca's powerful jaws closed around her. The scent that had lured it confirmed as it tasted blood. Still laughing and chatting, Emily's friends were oblivious to the tragedy unfolding just a short distance away. Only when they noticed her absence was getting longer did a sense of unease creep in. They called out to her, their voices tinged with playful annoyance. When there was no response, their calls became more urgent, the laughter fading as concern took hold. Panic began to spread among them as they scanned the water, looking for any sign of their friend. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes, the realization dawning that something was wrong. One of them, braver than the rest, swam out to the spot where they had last seen Emily. What he saw would haunt him forever. The water was tinged with red, the unmistakable sign of a violent encounter. He shouted to the others, his voice breaking with the weight of the words he couldn't quite form. The group converged around him, their fear becoming despair as they understood the gravity of the situation. They screamed for help, their voices carrying over the water to the beach, where others began to notice the commotion. Lifeguards sprang into action, their training kicking in as they raced to the scene. Once relaxed and carefree, the beachgoers watched in stunned silence. the day's joy replaced by a sad tension. The lifeguards dove into the water, searching for any sign of Emily. Time seemed to slow as they scoured the area, their movements frantic but methodical. The water, usually a source of pleasure and adventure, had become a place of dread. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, one of the lifeguards surfaced, his expression confirming the worst. They had found Emily's lifeless body, her pale form a stark contrast to the vibrant ocean. They brought her to the surface carefully but swiftly, their faces etched with the sorrow of their task. The friends watched in helpless despair as the lifeguards carried Emily's body to the shore. The reality of the tragedy hit them with full force, and the shock and grief were overwhelming. On the shore, the crowd stood in silent respect, their faces reflecting a shared sense of mourning. The lifeguards laid Emily's body gently on the sand, covering her with a blanket as if to protect her from the world that had suddenly turned so cruel. The paramedics arrived, but there was nothing they could do. The orca's attack had been swift and fatal. The news spread quickly, the story of the tragic accident casting a shadow over the sunny day. Reporters spoke to witnesses, their questions probing the raw emotions of those who had been there. The beach, once a place of joy and laughter, had become a site of mourning and reflection. Emily's friends remained by her side, their grief a palpable presence. They held each other, finding solace in their shared pain. The shock of the event had left them numb, their minds unable to process the reality of what had happened. They could only cling to the memories of Emily, the bright and vibrant young woman who had brought so much joy into their lives. In 2004, a dedicated marine researcher, Dr. David Miller, found himself in the icy waters of Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. The park, known for its stunning glaciers and diverse marine life, was the perfect place to study orcas. David was leading a whale-watching expedition to observe these magnificent creatures up close. The day was cold and clear, the sky a brilliant blue. David and his team had set out early in their small inflatable boat, eager to spot the orcas. As they navigated the frigid waters, David kept his eyes peeled for any sign of the whales. His heart raced excitedly as he saw the telltale dorsal fins slicing through the water. David was especially interested in one particular orca separated from its pod. The lone orca had been acting strangely, possibly agitated by recent encounters with boats. David hoped to understand its behavior and find a way to help it. As they drew closer, David could see the orca more clearly. It was a massive creature, its black and white body gliding effortlessly through the water. He raised his camera, ready to capture its movements. But something felt off. The orca's behavior was more erratic than usual, and David's excitement turned to concern. Suddenly, the orca turned and headed straight for their boat. David's heart skipped a beat. The orca rammed the side of the inflatable boat with tremendous force, sending it rocking violently. David was thrown into the freezing water, his body instantly numbed by the cold. Panic surged through him as he struggled to stay afloat. The orca was circling, its mighty jaws just beneath the surface. David knew he had to reach the safety of the larger research vessel, but it seemed so far away. The icy water sapped his strength, and his movements grew sluggish. Desperation gripped him as he kicked his legs, trying to distance himself from the orca. He glanced back, seeing the massive creature's fin cutting through the water, getting closer. David's mind raced, searching for a way to escape the orca's wrath and reach the safety of the larger boat. The cold water made every movement slow and heavy, but he knew he couldn't give up. He spotted a small ice floe just a short distance away and made it his immediate goal. Summoning every ounce of strength, David swam towards the ice floe. Sensing his movement, the orca followed closely, its presence a constant threat. David's breath came in ragged gasps, the frigid water biting his skin. He pushed forward, determined to survive. Finally, he reached the edge of the ice floe and hauled himself up with great effort. The ice was slippery and his hands were numb, but he pulled himself onto the solid surface. For a brief moment, he felt a wave of relief, but the orca still needed to be finished. It rammed the ice floe, causing it to crack and shift. David knew he couldn't stay on the ice floe for long. He needed to signal his team on the more extensive research vessel. He fumbled for the emergency flare in his pocket, his fingers clumsy from the cold. He ignited the flare with shaking hands, sending a bright red streak into the sky. His team on the research vessel spotted the signal and sprang into action. The boat sped towards David, cutting through the icy water with urgency. Distracted by the flare, the Orca gave David a precious few moments of reprieve. He watched as the larger boat drew nearer, his hope rekindling. The research vessel reached him just in time. His colleagues threw him a lifeline, and David grabbed it with all his remaining strength. They pulled him aboard, his body trembling from the cold and exhaustion. Safe on the boat, David collapsed, breathing heavily but relieved to be out of the water. The Orca lingered as the boat sped away, watching them from afar. David's heart pounded, but he knew he was safe now. His team wrapped him in blankets and checked his condition. Though he was bruised and cold, he would recover. The terrifying encounter with the aggressive Orca deepened David's respect for these powerful creatures. He shared his experience with the marine research community back on land, highlighting the importance of understanding and protecting orcas in their natural habitat. David's ordeal became a tale of caution and respect. The Orca, still roaming the waters of Glacier Bay National Park, remained a reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the sea. David continued his research, more determined than ever to find ways to coexist with these magnificent creatures. In 2013, the remote Isla del Coco, a national park located approximately 300 miles off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, served as a protected marine sanctuary teeming with abundant sea life, including multiple species of sharks thriving in its temperate waters. The remote, uninhabited islands had been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to their incredible biodiversity and efforts to protect the endangered Galapagos, white-tip reef and whale sharks that congregated there. A group of American tourists had booked an eco-tour to snorkel and scuba dive amid the vibrant coral reefs surrounding Isla del Coco. Among them was Calvin Davenport, a high school science teacher passionate about marine biology. On the second day of their excursion, the tourists were enjoying the warm waters in a relatively shallow inlet, enthralled by the schools of colorful fish darting between the swaying kelp fronds. But their tranquility was shattered when a deckhand on the dive boat began frantically waving and shouting for them to return to the ship immediately. Jeffrey Takata, the seasoned park ranger accompanying the tour, felt his blood run cold when the reason for the alarm became clear: cloudy trails of blood roiling up from the reef below. In a blind panic, the snorkelers thrashed towards the ladder, hauling themselves over the gunnels, but one tourist was not so fortunate. As the boat's crew pulled the last straggler, Claire O'Malley, onto the dive platform, they gasped in horror. Where her right leg had been was nothing but a frothing stump of torn flesh and protruding bone. An abnormally large great white shark, well over 15 feet long, had ambushed the woman, shearing off her limb with a catastrophic chomp before disappearing into the depths, potentially to counterattack. Thanks to the quick efforts of Calvin, who happened to be an experienced EMT, Claire was stabilized long enough to evacuate via helicopter to a hospital on the mainland. However, she would remain in intensive care, having lost over half her blood from the traumatic amputation. Jeffrey and the Park Service closed off part of the waters around Isla del Coco, as the massive rogue shark remained unaccounted for, potentially still lurking in the vicinity. They brought in Socorro Castillo, a renowned ichthyologist, to try and unravel the mystery behind the great white's extremely uncharacteristic hunting behavior. Great whites were present in moderate numbers in the marine sanctuary, but they rarely ventured into the shallow reef areas to hunt, preferring to cruise the deeper ocean outskirts. And an attack of such sizable proportions on a human was virtually unheard of, especially without being provoked. As Socorro analyzed environmental data collected by the research staff, a potential pattern emerged. Detectable levels of toxic runoff from agriculture and manufacturing on the mainland had appeared in the currents, particularly in the area where the attack occurred. She theorized that pollution and human activity may have driven the shark into a confused frenzy, causing it to view the swimmers as prey, rather than avoiding them as typical great white behavior dictates. If her hypothesis was correct, the great white could strike again at any moment, putting any human activity in the waters at extreme risk. Socorro urged Jeffrey and the rangers to evacuate personnel from the sanctuary until the rogue shark could be located and neutralized. However, the park warden bristled at the idea of closing off the sanctuary and interrupting their vital conservation and research operations for a prolonged period. He contended they had enough security measures to mitigate the risk while safely conducting their work. The tension came to a head when the rogue great white savagely killed a park ranger conducting underwater surveys. Jolted by this latest fatality, Jeffrey authorized a full-scale hunt to eradicate the threat once and for all, looking to Socorro for guidance. She warned eliminating the great white would be daunting and futile if the core issues of contamination and human disturbance weren't addressed. But she realized Jeffrey's duty was protecting human life. Steeling themselves, the pair embarked on an unorthodox hunt, using every tactic to interact with the predator in its territory. After several close calls, they realized the only solution was capturing the great white alive and relocating it to an isolated sanctuary away from humans. Though immensely challenging, it was a chance to preserve the fragile balance between species and humble humanity's role in the undersea realm. With persistence and daring, they eventually succeeded, restoring safety to the marine paradise through their courageous actions. In the aftermath, strict environmental regulations were enacted to curtail toxic runoff near the marine sanctuary. Jeffrey and Socorro's harrowing ordeal also fostered greater awareness of the need to respect the natural habitats of apex predators like great whites. The sanctuary flourished as an ecological wonder, a powerful reminder of the importance of conservation and coexistence with nature's most awe-inspiring creatures. In the year 2000, wildlife photographer Kevin Moore embarked on an expedition to Wrangel Island, Russia, to document the lives of seals on the ice floes. The Arctic was a harsh and unforgiving environment, but its beauty and unique wildlife drew Kevin every year. He had spent countless hours preparing for this trip, eager to capture the intimate moments of the seal colony. The day was clear and bitterly cold, the sun a distant orb barely providing warmth. Dressed in heavy Arctic gear, Kevin stepped carefully onto the ice floe. His camera was ready, its lens glinting in the pale light. He moved slowly and deliberately, not wanting to startle the seals. As he approached a group of seals lounging on the ice, he marveled at their serene presence. Kevin's focus landed on a mother seal and her pup. The pup was playful, rolling around on the ice while the mother watched protectively. Kevin knew he had to get closer for the perfect shot, but also understood the risks. He edged forward, his camera clicking softly. The mother seal eyed him warily but remained calm. Lost in his work, Kevin failed to notice just how close he was getting. The mother seal suddenly tensed, sensing a potential threat. Kevin realized his mistake too late. The ordinarily docile seal transformed into a fierce protector. With a mighty lunge, she charged at Kevin, her speed and aggression catching him off guard. Kevin stumbled backward, his boots slipping on the icy surface. He hit the ground hard, the cold seeping through his clothes. The mother seal was relentless, her barks loud and menacing. She snapped her jaws and slapped her flippers against the ice, driving Kevin further away from her pup. Panic set in as Kevin scrambled to his feet. He tried to retreat, but the ice was treacherous, causing him to slip and slide. The mother seals advanced, her eyes locked on him, determined to protect her young. Kevin's heart raced, knowing he had to think quickly to survive this unexpected encounter. His icebreaker ship was anchored a short distance away, a beacon of safety in the vast, icy expanse. Kevin's mind raced as he plotted his escape. He couldn't risk further provoking the seal, but couldn't stay where he was. He took a deep breath, focusing on moving slowly and steadily away from the agitated mother seal. The seal followed, her aggression undiminished. Kevin's every step was a precarious dance on the slippery ice. He kept his eyes on the ship, willing to reach it without incident. The icy wind whipped around him, but he pushed forward, knowing his survival depended on his ability to outmaneuver the protective mother. Kevin kept his eyes on the ship, willing to reach it without incident. The icy wind whipped around him, but he pushed forward, knowing his survival depended on his ability to outmaneuver the protective mother. Every step was a struggle. The ice beneath Kevin's feet was unforgiving, making it difficult to maintain his balance. The mother seal was relentless, her barks echoing across the ice floe. Kevin tried to keep his movements slow and steady, hoping not to provoke her further. However, the seal's determination was unyielding. As Kevin moved, he scanned the area for anything that might help him. He spotted a cluster of ice ridges that could offer temporary cover. Summoning his courage, he made a careful dash towards them. The seal lunged after him, but the ridges provided enough obstacle to slow her down. Kevin crouched behind the ice ridges, taking a moment to breathe. His hands trembled from the cold and the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He peeked over the hill, seeing the seal still searching for him. He knew this respite wouldn't last long. He had to make his move. Timing his next steps carefully, Kevin waited until the seal was momentarily distracted by another sound on the ice. He used the opportunity to slip around the ridge and head towards his ship. The icebreaker was so close now, but the path was still difficult. Kevin's careful pace allowed him to progress steadily, but the seal soon noticed his movement again. With renewed vigor, she charged once more. Kevin's heart pounded as he picked up his pace, his boots slipping on the ice. He could now see the ship's crew waving and shouting, their voices carried away by the wind. The final stretch was the most treacherous. Kevin felt the ice crack beneath him, but he pushed forward with all his might. The ship's crew had thrown a rope ladder over the side, dangling within reach. Kevin lunged for it, his fingers grasping the cold, rough rope. Kevin pulled himself up with a mighty heave, his muscles screaming in protest. The seal reached the ladder's base, snapping her jaws in frustration. But she couldn't climb. Kevin climbed higher, his body shaking with exhaustion and relief. The crew helped him aboard, pulling him to safety. Once on the ship, Kevin collapsed, gasping for breath. His body was battered and bruised, but he was alive. The crew wrapped him in warm blankets and the ship's medic checked him. Despite the ordeal, Kevin knew he had been fortunate. As the icebreaker pulled away from the ice floe, Kevin looked back at the mother seal who had returned to her pup. He felt a profound respect for her fierce protectiveness. The experience had been terrifying, but also reinforced the bond between mother and child in the wild. Kevin's photographs, though incomplete, told a powerful story. He knew he would never forget this day. The ice floe terror would serve as a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of wildlife and the respect it commanded. Back home, he would share his tale, using his harrowing encounter to advocate for greater understanding and protection of these magnificent creatures. It was the cool summer of 2014 when a team of experienced divers set their sights on the remote Palau Trench, a deep-sea trench located off the coast of the tiny Pacific island nation of Palau. For years, rumors had swirled about a sunken treasure ship, its hold brimming with priceless artifacts from a bygone era, lost to this mysterious underwater chasm. Calista Mendoza, a seasoned treasure hunter with a reputation for fearlessness and an insatiable thirst for adventure, led the expedition. Her crew consisted of Alejandro Torres, a former naval officer with extensive diving experience, and the siblings Marissa and Javier Ramirez, both skilled technical divers with a passion for underwater exploration. As their research vessel, the Azul Profundo cut through the vast waters of the Pacific, excitement crackled in the air like static electricity. Calista pored over the faded charts and ancient texts that had guided them to this remote location, her eyes alight with the promise of uncovering a long-lost treasure. She declared that that was it, her voice tinged with a reverence bordering on obsession. It was the resting place of the Dorada del Mar, a Spanish galleon laden with gold and artifacts beyond our wildest dreams. Alejandro, ever the pragmatist, arched an eyebrow skeptically. He confirmed if Caliste was certain the coordinates were accurate because they were venturing into uncharted territory there. Calista shot him a withering glance, asking if she had ever steered them wrong. She let the question hang in the air, her conviction unwavering. The crew made final preparations as the Azul Profundo neared the designated coordinates. Scuba tanks were checked, rebreathers were calibrated, and diving slates were handed out, each bearing an intricate map to guide them to their underwater destination. With a collective intake of breath, the divers submerged into the inky depths, their powerful dive lights cutting through the perpetual gloom that enveloped the trench. The descent was slow and methodical, each diver monitoring their air consumption and depth with practiced precision. A sense of awe washed over them as they neared the bottom of the trench. The seabed was littered with the remnants of shipwrecks, their once proud hulls reduced to ghostly skeletons by the relentless passage of time. Ancient amphorae and weathered artifacts peeked through the silt, tantalizing glimpses of the treasures that might lay in wait. Calista signaled for the team to regroup, her eyes shining with excitement. Using her slate, she traced the path they would need to follow, the map leading them deeper into the heart of the trench. The journey was arduous, with the divers navigating treacherous terrain and through labyrinthine coral and rock formations. But their perseverance was rewarded when Javier's light illuminated a sight that caused their hearts to skip a beat. Half buried in the silt lay the unmistakable outline of a ship's hull, its timbers warped and encrusted with centuries of marine growth. Callista's eyes widened as she took in the intricate carvings that adorned the stern, a telltale sign that they had indeed stumbled upon the legendary Dorada del Mar. Adrenaline coursing through their veins, the team set about carefully excavating the site, their movements precise and respectful as they uncovered the ship's secrets. Javier and Marissa worked in tandem, brushing away layers of silt to reveal the glint of gold and the shimmer of precious gemstones. Alejandro, his military training kicking in, kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, his gaze constantly sweeping the inky depths for any potential threats. It was this vigilance that alerted him to the first sign of danger. Then a massive shadow, darker than the surrounding gloom, emerged from the murky depths, its curved form cutting through the water with lethal grace. Alejandro's blood ran cold as he recognized the unmistakable silhouette of a great white shark, its fearsome jaws agape and its beady eyes fixed on the diving team. Alejandro alerted the others with a frantic series of hand signals to the impending threat. Callista, her face set in grim determination, signaled for them to continue their excavation, unwilling to abandon their hard-won prize. The shark circled closer, its powerful tail propelling it through the water with terrifying speed. Marissa watched in horror as the predator's jaws snapped shut mere inches from her face, the rush of displaced water sending her tumbling backward. Javier, his protective instincts kicking in, positioned himself between his sister and the shark. His eyes narrowed in defiance. But even his bravery paled in the face of the ocean's apex predator, its primordial hunger driving it closer to the team. As the minutes ticked by, tension mounted, each diver acutely aware of their dwindling air supply and the looming threat of the great white. Callista's face was a mask of concentration as she carefully extracted an ornate golden chalice from the wreckage, her movements slow and deliberate. But the shark's predatory senses, heightened by the scent of blood from a minor cut on Marissa's hand, seemed to grow more agitated with each passing second. Its circling tightened, its powerful tail thrashing the water into a furious maelstrom. Alejandro knew they were running out of time. With a series of urgent hand signals, he conveyed the gravity of the situation to Callista. Her face twisted in anguish, torn between the lure of the treasure and the preservation of her crew's safety. In the end, self-preservation won out. With a heavy heart, Callista signaled for the team to begin their ascent, clutching the golden chalice to her chest as they kicked towards the surface, their movements fueled by desperation. The great white, sensing its prey slipping away, surged forward with terrifying speed, its jaws snapping shut mere inches from Javier's fin. The young diver propelled himself upwards with a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, his heart pounding in his ears. The ascent felt like an eternity, each diver painfully aware of their rapidly depleting air supply and the relentless pursuit of the shark. Marissa's eyes widened in horror as the predator closed in on her brother, its jaws agape and its powerful body coiled to strike. Alejandro interposed himself between the shark and Javier in a moment of selfless bravery, brandishing a titanium dive knife in a desperate bid to fend off the attack. The undeterred shark surged forward, its massive bulk slamming into Alejandro with the force of a freight train. The impact sent the former naval officer tumbling through the water, his air supply momentarily cut off as the shark's thrashing tail clipped his regulator. For a few agonizing seconds, he flailed helplessly, his lungs burning for oxygen. Javier, acting on pure instinct, grabbed Alejandro's arm and hauled him towards the surface, his powerful kicks propelling them both upwards with renewed urgency. Marissa and Callista followed close behind, their faces etched with fear and determination. Finally, after an eternity, they breached the surface, their gasping breaths filling the air with a symphony of relief. The great white denied its prey circled menacingly beneath them, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a razor's edge. As the Azul Profundo's crew hauled them on board, the divers collapsed onto the deck, their bodies trembling with the lingering adrenaline rush of their harrowing encounter. Alejandro, his face pale and his eyes haunted, clutched the titanium dive knife that had saved his life, its blade bent and scarred from the shark's powerful jaws. Later on, the team found themselves grappling with the aftermath of their brush with death. As for the legendary Dorada del Mar, its secrets would remain largely undisturbed, save for the ornate golden chalice that now resided in a museum, a silent testament to the perils and wonders that awaited those daring enough to venture into the depths unknown. The underwater treasure hunt had been a harsh reminder of the fragility of life and the unforgiving nature of the ocean's depths. For the divers, it had been a baptism by fire, a crucible that had forged them into wiser, more cautious explorers of the underwater realm. As they looked back on that fateful expedition, they couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude, not for the treasure they had recovered, but for the ultimate prize, their lives, snatched from the jaws of death by sheer force of will, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship and camaraderie. In 2010, marine ecologist Dr. Mark Andrews embarked on a crucial dive in the Coral Sea off the coast of Australia. His research site and passion were the vibrant coral reefs teeming with life. Mark was studying the effects of climate change on these delicate ecosystems, hoping to gather data that could help preserve them for future generations. The day was perfect for diving. The sun shone brightly and the clear water offered excellent visibility. Mark adjusted his diving mask and breathed deeply before plunging into the warm, inviting waters. As he descended, the underwater world opened up, a mesmerizing array of colors and shapes. Schools of fish darted around, and the coral formations stretched like an underwater city. Mark swam deeper, eyes scanning the reef for signs of bleaching and other damage caused by rising ocean temperatures. His careful and deliberate movements ensured he didn't disturb the fragile coral. He paused frequently to take notes and photographs, documenting the reef's health. Suddenly, something caught his eye, a rare and beautiful sea snake, its body gliding gracefully through the water. The snake's scales shimmered in the sunlight, displaying vibrant colors. Mark knew this species was highly venomous, but he couldn't resist the opportunity to observe it up close. He moved slowly, his camera ready to capture the stunning creature. As Mark approached, the sea snake seemed to sense his presence. It turned towards him, its eyes locking onto his. For a moment, there was a tense standoff. Mark held his breath, hoping the snake would continue on its way. But the snake became agitated, its movements growing erratic. Before Mark could react, the snake struck with lightning speed, its fangs sinking into his arm. A sharp pain shot through him, and he recoiled, watching in horror as the snake retreated into the coral. Mark knew the seriousness of the situation. The sea snake's venom was potent, and he had only a short window to reach the surface and get the antidote waiting on his research vessel. Mark's vision began to blur and his limbs grew heavy. The venom was taking effect quickly. He glanced around, trying to orient himself. The intricate maze of the reef now seemed like a labyrinth designed to thwart his escape. He needed to navigate back to the surface, but every second counted. Summoning his remaining strength, Mark began to swim towards the surface. His movements were sluggish and he struggled to stay focused. The coral formations that had once fascinated him now appeared as obstacles in his path. He kicked his legs harder, pushing himself to move faster despite the growing numbness in his limbs. Mark's mind raced as he thought about the antidote on the research vessel. He knew his team would be monitoring his dive and would have seen his distress signal, but he couldn't rely solely on them. He had to return alone. The thought of his family and his commitment to his research fueled his determination. As he swam, he kept a wary eye for the sea snake, fearing another encounter. The reef was moving, and every shadow seemed like a potential threat. Mark's breaths came in ragged gasps through his regulator, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The surface seemed impossible, but Mark knew he couldn't give up. He had to reach safety, not just for himself, but for the future of the reefs he was dedicated to protecting. With each stroke, he fought against the venom coursing through his veins, determined to survive this lethal encounter. As Mark ascended, his vision blurred further and his limbs grew heavier. He focused on training, counting his strokes and regulating his breathing, trying to stay as calm as possible. He knew panic would only accelerate the spread of the venom. The coral's colors became hazy, and he could barely see the surface above him. Suddenly, Mark felt a sharp pain in his leg. He looked in horror to see another sea snake coiled around his calf. The snake struck again, its venom seeping into his bloodstream. Mark's heart pounded and he shook the snake off, but the additional venom made his situation even more dire. He could feel the paralysis creeping in, his movements becoming more labored. Desperation set in as Mark pushed himself harder, his body protesting with every stroke. He could see the silhouette of his research vessel above, the shadowy outline a beacon of hope. His team would be ready, but he had to get there first. He kept moving, each kick of his legs a battle against the venom's debilitating effects. With the surface within reach, Mark's strength was nearly gone. His vision tunneled, and his consciousness wavered. Summoning his last energy reserves, he broke through the surface, gasping for air. The research vessel was just a short distance away, and he could see his team waving frantically, already lowering the emergency ladder. Mark's body was numb, but he grabbed onto the ladder. His colleagues pulled him aboard, their faces etched with concern. He collapsed onto the deck, barely able to speak. The team quickly administered the antidote. Mark felt a cold rush as the medication entered his bloodstream, countering the venom's effects. The minutes that followed were a blur. Mark's vision slowly cleared and the paralysis began to subside. The team worked efficiently, treating his wounds and monitoring his vital signs. He could feel the warmth returning to his limbs, and the pain in his leg and arm became more bearable. As he lay on the deck recovering, Mark reflected on the harrowing experience. The sea snakes had been a stark reminder of the unpredictability and danger of the underwater world. He had come to the Coral Sea to study the effects of climate change. Still, he had encountered a different, equally urgent challenge. Once stabilized, Mark sat up with the help of his colleagues. The research vessel was heading back to the mainland where he would receive further medical attention. He looked out at the vast expanse of water, feeling relief and gratitude. His dedication to marine ecology had never wavered. Still, this experience deepened his respect for the ocean's power and creatures. Back on land, Mark's recovery continued. He shared his story with fellow researchers, emphasizing the importance of caution and respect in their work. The incident with the sea snakes became a valuable lesson for him and the scientific community. Mark's ordeal had been a close call, but it reinforced his commitment to protecting the world's oceans. The reefs of the Coral Sea, with their vibrant life and hidden dangers, were worth every risk. It was the summer of 2018 in the small coastal town of Donsol, Philippines. The quaint village was nestled between lush green hills and the shimmering azure waters of the Pacific Ocean. For generations, the locals had coexisted harmoniously with the diverse marine life in the area's rich ecosystem. However, a group of eco-tourists was about to experience a terrifying ordeal that would shatter the tranquil facade of this seaside paradise. Quintin Delgado, a renowned marine biologist, organized the tour to raise awareness about preserving the delicate balance of the local marine environment. Among the participants were Zarina Villanueva, a passionate environmentalist, and her husband, Javier Reyes, an amateur photographer eager to capture the wonders of the underwater world. The tour group boarded the Casiana, a sturdy yet weathered fishing vessel captained by the grizzled local Thomas Alvarez. His first mate, the young and energetic Maricel Santos, ensured all safety protocols were in place. The plan was to embark on a diving expedition to observe the magnificent whale sharks that frequented the waters off the coast of Donsol. As the Casiana set sail, the tourists' excited chatter filled the air. Quintin briefed them on the importance of maintaining a respectful distance from the gentle giants, emphasizing that their presence should not disrupt the sharks' natural behavior. With their diving gear in order and anticipation brewing, the group eagerly awaited their first encounter with the majestic creatures. After an hour, Tomas skillfully maneuvered the boat to a spot renowned for whale shark sightings. The crystal-clear waters offered excellent visibility, and the tourists eagerly donned their diving gear. One by one, they slipped beneath the surface, their eyes wide with wonder as they caught their first glimpses of the massive spotted sharks gliding gracefully through the azure expanse. For a while, the experience was nothing short of breathtaking. The whale sharks, seemingly unperturbed by the divers' presence, continued their serene dance through the vibrant coral gardens. Her heart swelling with joy, Zarina gestured excitedly to Javier, who eagerly snapped away with his camera, capturing the majestic creatures in their natural habitat. However, their blissful reverie was shattered when a sudden jarring noise reverberated through the water. The anchored Cassiana had drifted dangerously close to a treacherous reef, and the anchor chain had become entangled in the sharp coral formations. Tomas and Maricel, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately signaled for the divers to resurface. As the group hastily ascended, a sense of unease settled over them. The commotion caused by the struggling vessel had attracted the attention of a different kind of shark, one far more menacing than the gentle whale sharks they had been observing. Quentin's experienced eye immediately recognized the telltale silhouettes of oceanic white-tip sharks, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with predatory grace. These apex predators, known for their aggressive nature, had likely been drawn to the area by the thrashing of the anchor chain and the disturbance it had caused. With the divers safely back on board, Tomas and Maricel worked feverishly to free the anchor, their efforts punctuated by the ominous circling of the white-tip sharks. The tourists huddled together, their hearts pounding as they watched the sharks increasingly agitated by the ongoing disturbance. Zarina clutched Javier's hand, her knuckles turning white with fear. She whispered to Javier, her voice trembling. Quentin, his brow furrowed with concern, addressed the group. He urged them to remain calm. These sharks were highly territorial and had been drawn to the area by the noise and movement. Their best course of action was to stay as still and quiet as possible until they could free the anchor and get the boat moving again. It was easier said than done as the sharks' circling grew tighter and more menacing with each passing minute. The tourists could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Tomas and Maricel redoubled their efforts, their muscles straining against the stubborn anchor chain. Finally, with a tremendous heave, the anchor broke free, and the Cassiana lurched forward, propelled by the powerful currents. Relief washed over the group as the white-tip sharks fell behind, their interest waning as the disturbance subsided. However, their respite was short-lived. The propeller churned the waters as the Cassiana gained speed, kicking up a heated trail of bubbles and vibrations. To the sharks, this new disturbance was an irresistible lure, and they gave chase, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with terrifying speed. The tourists watched in horror as the first white-tip shark closed in, its mighty jaws snapping mere feet away from the stern of the boat. Maricel uttered a terrified shriek, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. Quentin, his mind racing, turned to Thomas. He urged Thomas that they needed to cut the engine and let the current carry them away from the sharks. The vibrations and noise only attracted them further. Tomas nodded grimly, his weathered face etched with concern. He killed the engine, and the Cassiana drifted silently, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. For a moment it seemed as though the plan had worked. The sharks fell back, their interest seemingly waning. But then, one particularly bold white-tip surged forward, its mighty jaws clamping down on the wooden gunwale, splintering the wood with a sickening crunch. The tourists recoiled in terror, their screams piercing the air. Javier, his camera forgotten, clutched Zarina protectively to his chest, his eyes wide with fear. Quentin, his heart pounding, knew they had to act quickly. They needed a diversion to draw the sharks away from the boat. Without hesitation, the grizzled captain grabbed the bucket of fish guts and began tossing handfuls into the water, creating a trail that led away from the boat. The sharks, their predatory instincts piqued, immediately gave chase, their sleek bodies disappearing into the depths in pursuit of the tantalizing scent. For a brief moment, the group breathed a collective sigh of relief. However, their respite was short-lived. As the last chum dissipated, the sharks began to circle back, their hunger unsated. This time, they were joined by even more white-tips, drawn to the area by the promise of an easy meal. The tourists huddled together, their faces etched with fear as the sharks closed in again. Tomas was already working on the ignition. The engine sputtered and the Cassiana lurched forward, cutting through the water with renewed speed. Time seemed to slow as one of the shark's gaping maw descended, its razor-sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. Maricel screamed, her hands flying to her face in terror. But at the last moment, a stroke of luck intervened. The shark's trajectory was slightly off, and instead of clamping down on the boat, its jaws closed around the trailing anchor chain. The shark thrashed violently, its powerful body twisting and writhing as it struggled to free itself from the unyielding metal links. The Cassiana surged forward, putting distance between itself and the enraged shark. As the minutes ticked by, the white tips gradually fell behind, their interest waning as the boat reached the safety of the shallower waters near the shore. The tourists disembarked on shaky legs, their faces ashen, and their bodies trembling from the harrowing ordeal they had just endured. Zarina clung to Javier, her eyes wide and haunted, while Quentin and the rest of the group huddled together, drawing strength from their shared survival. Tomas finally broke the silence, his gruff voice tinged with relief. He chuckled, though his laughter held a nervous edge as he claimed the ordeal was close. Quentin nodded solemnly, his brow furrowed with concern, and murmured that they were fortunate to make it back in one piece. Maricel, still visibly shaken, let out a shuddering breath. She whispered that she had never seen anything like that, as the sharks were relentless. As the group made their way back to the safety of the shore, they couldn't help but reflect on the fragile balance between humans and the mighty predators of the sea. What had begun as an innocent eco-tour, a chance to observe the majesty of nature up close, had quickly devolved into a life-or-death struggle against the very creatures they had come to admire. As they went their separate ways, each carrying the scars of their ordeal, they knew they would never again look at the sea with the same sense of wonder and innocence. The eco-tour had gone wrong, but in the process, they gained a newfound respect for the delicate balance between humans and the ancient predators that called the ocean their domain.